Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who betray you the hardest. I'm sitting here in this corner cafe, watching the rain streak down the window, looking out at the very street corner where I once slept under newspapers to keep warm. There's a certain irony in that, isn't there? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Eleanor Harrison, though most people call me Ellie. I'm 75 years old now, and I've lived a life that could fill several books. But today, I want to share something with you. A story I rarely tell, because even now, years later, it makes my chest tighten with a pain that has nothing to do with age. It's a story about pride, betrayal, and what happens when you confuse unconditional love with unconditional trust. I grew up poor. Not the romantic kind of poor you see in movies, but the real kind. The kind where you wear shoes with cardboard stuffed in the soles and pretend you're not hungry at dinner because there isn't enough food to go around. My father worked double shifts at the factory, and my mother cleaned houses until her hands were raw. They taught me one thing above all else: work hard, and you can build something that no one can take away from you. I believed that with every fiber of my being. In 1968, at 18 years old, I started as a teller at First National Bank. I wore the same two blouses alternating throughout the week, washing one while wearing the other. I studied at night, taking correspondence courses in business and finance. While other girls my age were out dancing and dating, I was memorizing interest rate tables and learning the intricacies of commercial lending. 3 years later, I met James Harrison at a friend's wedding. He was an engineer, kind-hearted, with warm brown eyes and a laugh that made you want to laugh too. We married in 1972 in a small ceremony at the courthouse. I wore a dress I'd made myself. We couldn't afford much, but we had dreams. Big dreams. In 1975, our son Marcus was born. I remember holding him in the hospital, this tiny, perfect being, and promising him that he would never know the poverty I'd known. He would have opportunities, education, a real future. Then, in 1980, on a rainy Tuesday evening that I relive in my nightmares, a drunk driver ran a red light. James died instantly. Marcus was only 5 years old. I fell apart for exactly 3 days. Then I pulled myself together, because I had a child who needed me and bills that wouldn't pay themselves. I went back to work with a ferocity that surprised even me. I wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. I was working to prove that my son and I would not just survive, we would thrive. And we did. By 1985, I'd been promoted to assistant manager. I'd saved every penny I could, living in a modest apartment, buying second-hand clothes, skipping luxuries. That year, I did something I'd dreamed about since childhood. I bought a house. Not just any house, a beautiful 3-story Victorian on Maple Street, with a wraparound porch, original stained glass windows, and a garden where roses climbed up white trellises. It cost $89,000, which felt like a fortune, but I'd saved a 20% down payment. I remember the day we moved in. Marcus was 10 years old, and he ran through every room, shouting with joy. "Mum, this is ours?" "Really ours? Really ours," I told him, and I meant it with every cell in my body. This house was our fortress, our proof that hard work mattered. The next 20 years were good ones. I continued rising through the bank's ranks, eventually becoming regional manager in 1997. I oversaw 6 branches, managed multi-million-dollar portfolios, and mentored younger employees. Marcus grew into a gentle, thoughtful young man. He went to college, state school, not Ivy League. But still, he was the first in my family to get a degree. He studied literature, which worried me from a practical standpoint. But I was proud of him for following his passion. He met Jennifer in 2003, when he was 30. She was attractive, sharp-featured with calculating green eyes, and she worked in marketing. I remember our first meeting. She looked around my house with an appraising eye that made me uncomfortable, the way you might evaluate a property you're considering purchasing. "What a charming old place," she'd said, running her finger along the mantelpiece. "Must be worth quite a bit now, with the neighborhood gentrifying." I should have paid attention to that comment. They married in 2005. Marcus was so in love, so eager to please her. I tried to like Jennifer, I really did. But there was something about the way she smiled at me, with her mouth, but not her eyes, that made me wary. Over the next decade, Marcus and Jennifer struggled financially. He worked as a freelance writer, taking whatever assignments he could get. She bounced between marketing jobs, always complaining about incompetent bosses. They rented a series of increasingly expensive apartments, always seeming to live beyond their means. Designer handbags, expensive dinners out, yearly vacations to exotic locations. Meanwhile, they complained they couldn't afford to buy a house. I helped when I could. Money for groceries here, a loan there that we both knew wouldn't be repaid. I told myself I was being a good mother, helping my child when he needed it. Then came 2018. I was 70 years old and had just retired after 45 years in banking. Marcus and Jennifer came to visit one Sunday afternoon in June. We sat on my porch, drinking lemonade, and Jennifer started talking about how the rent on their apartment had increased again. "We're 45 years old and still renting," Marcus said, and I heard real frustration in his voice. "We'll never be able to afford a down payment at this rate. The market is insane." Jennifer touched his arm, then looked at me. "Eleanor, you have this big house, just you rattling around in it, and Marcus is your only child. This will all be his someday anyway, right?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I pushed it away. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "Well," she said, leaning forward with that smile of hers, "what if you put Marcus's name on the deed now? That way, he has the security of knowing he owns property. You'd still live here, of course, but it would give him that stability, that sense of ownership he's never had." Marcus looked at me with such hope in his eyes. My boy, who I'd raised alone, who I'd sacrificed everything for. How could I deny him this? "Mom, you don't have to," Marcus said quickly, but I could hear the yearning in his voice. I thought about it for exactly 3 days. I consulted with my financial advisor, who advised against it. "Eleanor, you can leave him the house in your will. There's no reason to give up your ownership now." But I didn't listen. I wanted to give my son security. I wanted him to feel the pride of ownership that I'd felt. And, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I wanted his gratitude. I wanted him to know how much I loved him. So in July 2018, I went to the lawyer's office and added Marcus's name to the deed as a joint owner. The look on his face when I told him is something I'll never forget. He hugged me so tightly, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you. This means everything." Jennifer smiled too, but something about that smile should have warned me. For the first year, everything seemed fine. Marcus and Jennifer moved into the second floor of my house. They still had their apartment lease to finish, but they started spending more time at their house. Jennifer helped with cooking sometimes, and I enjoyed having my 2 grandsons, Jake and Tommy, around. The boys were 7 and 5, full of energy and laughter. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. It started with small comments. "Eleanor, do you really need all this space in the master bedroom? It's the largest room in the house. These curtains are so outdated. We should really modernize. That antique furniture is lovely, but wouldn't the dining room look better with a contemporary set? I brushed it off at first. Different generations have different tastes, I told myself. Then the comments became more pointed. At dinner one evening in early 2019, Jennifer started talking, not to me, but about me, as if I weren't there. Once Eleanor moves to a retirement community, we can finally redo the third floor, she said to Marcus, cutting her chicken with precise movements. It would make a perfect master suite. Skylights, a spa bathroom, the works. I'm not moving to a retirement community, I said firmly. This is my home. Jennifer looked at me with barely concealed irritation. Well, eventually you'll need more care, and it would be selfish to expect Marcus to be your caretaker. These houses are meant for families, Eleanor. Young families. Marcus said nothing. He kept his eyes on his plate. That was the first time I felt truly afraid. Over the next months, Jennifer's criticisms multiplied. I took up too much space in the garage. My gardening tools were cluttering the shed. My habit of watching television in the evening was intrusive to their privacy. The guest room where I'd set up my sewing machine needed to be converted into Jennifer's yoga studio. Each complaint chipped away at my sense of belonging in my own home. But what hurt more was Marcus's silence. The son I'd raised to stand up for what was right, to defend those who couldn't defend themselves, said nothing as his wife slowly eroded my place in the house I'd bought with my own money. Marcus, I said to him one day when we were alone, do you remember when we first moved into this house? You were 10 years old. You said it was the most beautiful place you'd ever seen. He looked uncomfortable. Mum, that was a long time ago. I bought this house for us, I continued, for you and me. I worked myself to exhaustion to afford it. And I appreciate that, he said, but his voice was flat, rehearsed. But things change. Jennifer and I need space to raise our family. We need to make this house our own. It's my house too, I said quietly. His expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Actually, Mum, from a legal standpoint, I'm the owner. You signed over your rights. The bottom dropped out of my world. I made you a joint owner. That doesn't mean... It means I have every right to make decisions about this property, he interrupted. And you need to accept that. I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, and I didn't recognize him. The final blow came in March 2020. The whole world was shutting down because of COVID-19. The news was filled with stories about overcrowded hospitals, people dying alone, panic buying. I was 72 years old, in the highest risk category, and terrified. Jennifer called a family meeting in the living room, my living room, with the fireplace I'd saved for months to have restored, the built-in bookshelves I'd filled over decades. Eleanor, she said, sitting across from me with her hands folded in her lap like a CEO delivering bad news to an underperforming employee. We've decided that it's time for you to move out. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You have a good pension from the bank, she continued calmly. You can afford a nice apartment. There are several senior living communities in the area. This house is too big for you anyway, and with the pandemic, it's better if we limit the number of people in the household. I turned to Marcus, waiting for him to intervene, to tell his wife that she was being ridiculous. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus, I said, and I hated how my voice shook. He cleared his throat. Mum, Jennifer's right. It would be better if you had your own place. We need the space. The boys are getting older. They each need their own room, and with both of us working from home now. This is my home, I said, standing up, my hands trembling. I bought this house. I raised you in this house. You can't just throw me out. Jennifer stood too and pulled out a folder from the side table. She handed me papers, legal documents. Actually, we can. The house is in Marcus's name. You're not on the deed anymore. Legally, you're a tenant at will, and we're giving you 30 days' notice. I looked at the papers, but the words blurred through my tears. I made you a joint owner. I didn't sign away my rights completely. Actually, Jennifer said with that terrible smile, when you made Marcus a joint tenant with right of survivorship, you gave him equal ownership. And since you're living here without paying rent or contributing to the mortgage— There is no mortgage. I paid off this house in 2003. You're essentially a guest, and we're asking you to leave. I looked at my son, this man I'd given everything to. Marcus, please. How can you do this to me? Finally, he met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart more than anything else. Resentment. You always held it over my head, he said quietly. How hard you worked. How much you sacrificed. Everything you gave up for me. Do you know what it's like, growing up with that weight? Never being able to make my own choices because I had to live up to your sacrifices? I never— You did? He said, his voice rising. Every time I wanted to study literature instead of business, every time I chose a creative career over a corporate one, I saw the disappointment in your eyes. Jennifer is right. This house represents everything I tried to escape. Your control, your expectations, your constant reminders of how much I owe you. I felt like I'd been slapped. I loved you. Everything I did was because I loved you. Love shouldn't come with a price tag, Jennifer said coldly. Now you have 30 days. I suggest you start looking for apartments. I want to tell you that I fought back, that I hired a lawyer, that I stood my ground. But the truth is, I was in shock. I'd given this man life, raised him alone, denied myself pleasures and comforts so he could have opportunities. And this was my reward. I spent the next 3 weeks in a daze, looking at apartments I couldn't afford. My pension from the bank was decent, $2,400 a month, but I'd been living rent-free for so long that I'd spent more freely than I should have. I'd helped Marcus with loans I'd never expected back. I'd paid for my grandson's school supplies and birthday parties. I'd renovated the house that was now being stolen from me. The cheapest apartments I could find were $1,800 a month for a studio, and that was before the pandemic drove up prices and reduced availability. I applied to 3 places and was rejected. Too old, they said. Too much of a risk that I wouldn't be able to keep up with payments. On April 15th, 2020, exactly 30 days after that terrible conversation, I packed 2 suitcases with my clothes and a few precious photographs. I loaded them into my 1998 Honda Civic, the car I'd driven for 22 years, because I'd never seen the point in buying something new when the old one still worked. Marcus and Jennifer were out with the boys. They couldn't even face me on my last day. I left my key on the kitchen counter and walked out of my house for the last time. I drove aimlessly for hours, crying until I had no more tears. As evening fell, I realized I had nowhere to go. I'd been too ashamed to tell my friends what was happening. My colleagues from the bank had all retired and moved away. I had no siblings, no close family. I parked in the lot of a 24-hour grocery store and tried to sleep in my car. But it was uncomfortable, and every sound made me jump. I was terrified someone would rob me, or that the police would make me move. For the next 2 weeks, I rotated between parking lots, the grocery store, a church, a public park. I used the grocery store bathroom to wash up. I bought cheap food, crackers, peanut butter, fruit, and ate sitting in my car, watching other people go about their normal lives. I kept thinking someone would help me, that Marcus would realize what he'd done and call to apologize. But my phone stayed silent. Then my car broke down. The transmission failed in the middle of an intersection, and it cost $3,200 to fix, money I didn't have. The mechanic towed it to his shop, and I walked away with my 2 suitcases, leaving my last possession behind. I was now truly homeless. For the first few nights, I slept in doorways of closed shops. I discovered quickly that most businesses have security systems that alert the police to loiterers. I was moved along again and again, always politely but firmly. I found a bench outside St. Mary's Church that was partially sheltered by an overhang. That became my bed. I used one suitcase as a pillow and kept the other close, terrified someone would steal the few things I had left. My mother's wedding ring, my bank employee ID from my first day on the job, photographs of Marcus as a child. The days blurred together. I stood in line at soup kitchens for meals. I used the public library bathroom to wash up until they started limiting hours due to COVID. When it rained, I huddled under bridges or in parking garage stairwells, shivering in my wet clothes. Do you know what it's like to be invisible? People walked past me every day. People who might have been my banking clients once, who would have called me Mom and asked for my expertise. Now they looked through me as if I were made of glass. I started collecting cans and bottles to recycle for money, 5 cents per container. I needed 40 containers to buy a $2 coffee to warm up in the morning. I became an expert at knowing which garbage cans were most likely to have recyclables, which routes the street cleaners took before I could get there first. The absolute lowest point came on a night in late May. It had been raining for 3 days straight, a cold spring rain that seeped into your bones. I was coughing constantly, my chest tight and painful. I'd found shelter under a highway overpass, but the wind whipped the rain sideways, soaking through the cardboard I'd laid down. I lay there, shivering violently, coughing until my ribs ached, and I thought, is this how I die? After working for 50 years, after building a career, after raising a child alone, is this what my life amounts to? Dying alone under a bridge like discarded trash? I thought about my parents, who'd worked themselves into early graves to give me opportunities. What would they think if they could see me now? I thought about my younger self, that ambitious 18-year-old girl who believed hard work would protect her from poverty. I'd been such a fool. I must have passed out, because the next thing I remember was someone shaking my shoulder. I opened my eyes to see a young woman, maybe 30, with kind brown eyes and a volunteer vest from the homeless shelter. "Mom, are you okay? Mom, can you hear me?" I tried to answer, but I could only cough. She felt my forehead and her eyes widened. "You're burning up. I'm calling an ambulance." "No," I managed to croak. "Can't afford—" "You're sick," she said firmly. "Really sick. You need help." Her name was Rosa Martinez, and she quite possibly saved my life. She stayed with me until the ambulance came, rode with me to the hospital, and was there when I woke up 3 days later. I had pneumonia. Severe pneumonia. The doctor said if I'd waited even another day, it might have been too late. Rosa visited me every day during my week-long hospital stay. She brought me clean clothes, toiletries, magazines. She treated me like a person, not a problem to be solved. "Why are you being so kind?" I asked her one day. She smiled. "My abuela, my grandmother. She was homeless for a while after my uncle stole her savings. Someone helped her then. I'm just paying it forward." When I was released, Rosa helped me get into a transitional shelter. It wasn't luxurious, A room I shared with 3 other women, strict rules, mandatory job training sessions even though I was retired. But it was safe, warm, and dry. The social worker assigned to my case was named Patricia, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd heard every story. When I told her what had happened with my house, she looked at me with something like pity. "Did you get a lawyer?" she asked. "I can't afford one. There are legal aid services. You might have a case for elder abuse." I thought about it for a long time. Could I really take my own son to court? Expose our family dysfunction to the world? In the end, I couldn't do it. Not because I forgave him, but because I realized that fighting would only hurt me more. The house was legally his. I'd made the mistake of trusting without protecting myself. I lived in that shelter for 8 months, working my way through their program. I attended job training sessions, even though at 72 no one was going to hire me. I met with counselors who tried to help me process my trauma. I sat in group therapy sessions with other homeless people, listening to their stories: addiction, mental illness, domestic violence, economic catastrophe. Each person with their own path to the street. One woman, Helen, was 84. She'd been a teacher for 40 years. Her daughter had convinced her to sign over power of attorney, then drained her bank accounts and sold her condo. Helen had been living in her car for 2 years before the shelter. "Why don't you press charges?" I asked her. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Because she's my daughter. Because despite everything, I still love her. And because the shame of admitting what happened, of everyone knowing I was such a fool, it's easier to just let it go." I understood exactly what she meant. During those months, Marcus called twice. The first time was in June, about 6 weeks after I'd left. "Mom? Are you okay?" "I tried calling your old number, but it's disconnected." I'd had to give up my cell phone plan. I was using a free phone from a charity program. "I'm alive," I said flatly. "Where are you living?" "Why do you care?" Silence. Then, "Mum, don't be like that. You're the one who chose to leave. We gave you 30 days' notice. That's legal and fair." "Legal and fair," I repeated. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" "You're being dramatic. Lots of seniors downsize. It's normal." "I'm homeless, Marcus. I'm living in a shelter. I had pneumonia and almost died under a highway bridge. Is that normal?" More silence. Then, quietly, "You're exaggerating. You have a pension. You could get an apartment. And you have a house that I bought and paid for. A house you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. You gave it to me. I made you joint owner because you're my son, because I loved you and wanted you to feel secure. I never imagined you'd use that to throw me out onto the street. Jennifer and I needed—" "I don't want to hear about what Jennifer needs," I said, and hung up. The second call came in October. This time there was something different in his voice. Strain, maybe even fear. "Mum, I need to talk to you about something." "I'm listening." "Jennifer and I are separating. She wants a divorce." Despite everything, I felt a small pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. She's taking half the house value. Her lawyer says she's entitled to it since we've been married for 15 years, and she contributed to the—" He stopped. "The thing is, I might have to sell the house to buy her out." "Ah, so that's why he was calling." "And you want what from me?" I asked. "I thought maybe you could help. You could loan me the money to pay Jennifer, and then you could move back in and we could—" I laughed. I actually laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "You want me to give you money? Money I don't have, by the way, because I'm living in a shelter. to buy out the wife who threw me onto the street so I can move back into the house I bought with my own money in the first place. When you put it that way, how else would I put it, Marcus? You made your choice. You chose Jennifer over me. You stood by while she threw your 70-year-old mother out of her own home. You let me become homeless rather than stand up to your wife. And now that she's leaving you, now that you're facing consequences, you come crying to me for help. You're my mother. You're supposed to. I was your mother when I worked double shifts to give you a good life. I was your mother when I paid for your college education. I was your mother when I put your name on my house because I wanted you to feel secure. And what did you do? You betrayed me in the worst way possible. I made a mistake, he said, and I could hear tears in his voice. I know I made a mistake. Jennifer, she influenced me. She made me see things differently. But now I understand. You understand that you need something from me, I interrupted. That's all. If Jennifer had stayed, if you still had your comfortable life in my house, would you be calling me now? Would you even care that I nearly died on the street? He had no answer for that. Marcus, I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I want you to really think about something. I gave you life. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked myself to exhaustion to provide for you. I denied myself relationships, vacations, luxuries, so you could have the best. And when I needed you most, when I was old and vulnerable, you threw me away like garbage. Mom, I'm not finished. You didn't just put me out of my house. You stripped away my dignity. You made me question everything I'd worked for, everything I believed about family and love and loyalty. You taught me that blood means nothing, that a lifetime of sacrifice can be erased by one selfish decision. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I believe you're sorry. Sorry that Jennifer left you. Sorry that you might lose the house. Sorry that your comfortable life is falling apart. But are you sorry for what you did to me? Are you sorry for how you treated me? Or are you just sorry that your plan didn't work out? He started to cry then, really cry. Please, Mom. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you forgive me? Can we start over? I thought about it. I really did. Part of me, the mother part that never quite dies, wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, to help fix his problems. But then I remembered lying under that bridge, coughing up blood, thinking I was going to die alone. I remembered the shame of standing in soup kitchen lines. I remembered the fear of sleeping on the street, vulnerable to anyone who might want to hurt me. I remembered all of it. Marcus, I said gently, I forgive you because carrying hate and anger will only hurt me more. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. And it certainly doesn't mean giving you another chance to hurt me. So that's it? You're just giving up on me? No, son. You gave up on me. I'm just accepting it. I hung up, and I haven't spoken to him since. That was 3 years ago. I'm 75 now, sitting in this cafe with my journal, looking out at the streets where I once slept. I live in a small studio apartment in a senior housing complex now. It's 400 square feet, barely bigger than my old master bedroom closet. But it's mine. Well, I rent it with assistance from a housing program, but it's my space. I volunteer at the local food bank 3 days a week, the same food bank where I once stood in line for meals. I help sort donations, organize the shelves, and sometimes I work the distribution line, handing bags of groceries to people who remind me of who I was not so long ago. I see the shame in their eyes, the way they can't quite meet my gaze, and I make sure to smile warmly and say, "Take care now. We're here if you need us again. Rosa and I have become friends. She's like a daughter to me, more of a daughter than Marcus ever managed to be a son. We have coffee every Sunday, and she tells me about her work at the shelter, about the people she's trying to help. Sometimes I go with her, and I talk to the women there, sharing my story. I tell them that they're not alone, that they're not failures, that sometimes life breaks you through no fault of your own. Helen, my friend from the shelter, lives in the same senior complex I do. We play cards on Tuesday evenings and talk about our ungrateful children. She never did press charges against her daughter. Neither of us did. We carry that weight, that knowledge, that we allowed ourselves to be victimized by the people who should have protected us. Last month, I got a letter from Marcus. He did have to sell the house, my beautiful Victorian house that I'd poured my heart into for 33 years. Jennifer got half the proceeds in the divorce. Marcus sent me a check for $20,000. "This is your share," the letter said. "I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but it's what's fair, and I want you to have it. Please, Mum. Please give me a chance to make this right." I looked at that check for a long time. $20,000. The house had sold for $680,000. I'd bought it for $89,000 in 1985 and paid it off completely. Every dollar of that equity was built on my work, my sacrifice, my dreams. And he was offering me $20,000. I tore up the check, not out of anger, though anger was part of it. I tore it up because accepting that money would mean accepting the narrative that I was owed a share of something that should have been entirely mine. It would mean legitimizing what he'd done, putting a price tag on my betrayal. Some things can't be paid for in dollars. I wrote back, "Marcus, I don't want your money. I don't want your guilt offerings. What I want is for you to live with what you did, to remember every day that you chose cruelty over compassion, greed over gratitude. I want you to look at your sons and wonder if they'll do to you what you did to me. That's the only justice I need." I mailed it and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. People ask me sometimes if I'm bitter. The answer is complicated. Am I bitter that I lost my house, my security, my belief that family means something? Yes. Am I bitter that I worked for 50 years only to end up homeless in my 70s? Absolutely. But I'm also grateful, in a strange way. Grateful that I survived. Grateful that I learned the truth about my son before I died, rather than going to my grave believing in a love that didn't exist. Grateful for people like Rosa, who showed me that kindness still exists in the world, even if it didn't come from my own blood. I've learned hard lessons, lessons I wish I'd understood decades ago. Never give away your security, no matter how much you love someone. Love is not insurance. Love does not guarantee loyalty. I thought that making Marcus a co-owner would bind us closer, would show him how much I trusted him. Instead, it gave him the weapon he needed to betray me. Actions speak louder than words, and patterns speak louder than promises. I saw the warning signs: Jennifer's mercenary comments about the house, Marcus's growing coldness, the way they spoke about me as if I were already gone. I ignored those signs because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale of family loyalty. I chose hope over evidence, and I paid the price. You cannot love someone into being the person you want them to be. I loved Marcus desperately, sacrificed everything for him, believed that my love would shape him into a good man. But love is not alchemy. It cannot transform selfishness into generosity, weakness into strength. Marcus was always going to be the man he became. I just refused to see it. Your worth is not measured by what you give others, but by who you are when you have nothing left to give. I defined myself by my sacrifices: the devoted mother, the selfless provider. When that was stripped away, when I had nothing left to give, I had to discover who Eleanor Harrison actually was underneath all those roles. I'm still learning. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. I forgave Marcus not because he deserved it, but because carrying that much hate was poisoning me. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen. It means releasing the debt they owe you, because collecting it would cost you more than it's worth. Sometimes people tell me I should have fought harder, should have sued Marcus for elder abuse, should have exposed what he did to the family and friends. Maybe they're right. Maybe I could have won something in court, gotten some of my money back. But I was tired. So tired. And I realized that no court could give me back what I'd really lost. The belief that my son loved me, the security of knowing I had family who would protect me. Those things, once broken, can't be repaired by legal judgments. I think about my mother sometimes, who cleaned houses until her hands bled. I think about my father, who worked double shifts at the factory. They taught me that hard work would protect me, that if I just worked hard enough, I'd be safe. They were wrong. Hard work is good. Building something is good. But security doesn't come from houses or bank accounts, or even from family. Security comes from knowing you can survive the worst and still find reasons to get up in the morning. I survived. I'm still here. I have my little studio apartment with its single window overlooking a parking lot. I have my volunteer work. I have Rosa's friendship. I have my Tuesday card games with Helen. I have my coffee every morning at this cafe, watching the world go by. It's not the life I planned. It's not the retirement I earned. But it's my life, and I'm the one living it. Marcus sends emails occasionally, awkward messages about how the boys are doing, about his new job, about how he's working on himself in therapy. I read them and delete them. I don't respond. There's nothing left to say. My grandsons, Jake would be 14 now, Tommy 12. I wonder about them sometimes. Do they ask about me? Does Marcus tell them what he did? Or has he convinced himself of a different story? One where I chose to leave, where I'm the unreasonable one? It doesn't matter. They're strangers to me now, just as I am to them. The hardest part isn't the loss of the house or the money. It's the loss of the future I'd imagined. I'd pictured myself growing old in that Victorian house, pictured my grandsons visiting for holidays, pictured Marcus caring for me the way I'd cared for him when he was young. That future is gone, and sometimes the grief of that loss still hits me like a wave. But I've learned to swim in grief. I've learned that you can survive things you never thought you could. I've learned that pride is worthless when you're sleeping under a bridge, but dignity, real dignity, is something no one can take from you. I am Eleanor Harrison. I'm 75 years old. I worked for 50 years and built a life with my own two hands. I was betrayed by the person I loved most. I lost everything and survived anyway. That's my story. Not the story I wanted to tell. Not the story of success and triumph I'd planned to share with my grandchildren. But it's the truth, and I've earned the right to tell it. If there's anyone out there who's thinking about putting their child's name on their house, their bank account, their assets, please learn from my mistake. Protect yourself. Set up proper legal structures. Don't confuse love with trust. Don't assume that your sacrifice will be remembered or repaid. And if there's anyone out there who's lost everything, who's sleeping in their car or under a bridge, who's wondering if they can survive another day, you can. I'm proof of that. You are stronger than you know, more resilient than you believe. The sun is setting now, and the cafe is getting ready to close. I'll walk back to my little apartment, make myself some tea, and maybe call Rosa to chat about our week. Tomorrow, I'll go to the food bank and help sort cans of soup. Next week, I have a doctor's appointment to manage my high blood pressure. It's a small life, a quiet life, nothing like what I'd planned. But it's mine, and I'm still here to live it. That's enough. That has to be enough.